Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Down the Donut Hole podcast. And today, measles and mayhem. And maybe some fun stuff later.
I hope so. I hope I can dig stuff up. Today feels very Monday, if you know what I mean, trying to get back to business. And I've got a lot of other things coming up early next week that is going to kind of force me to do a lot more in preparation for that. I've got a few other things on the plate. It's a Monday. What can I say? And our internet,
that's right. We may possibly some in-studio guests next week.
Hopefully. That's one of the things I'm working on. So we'll see how that turns out. Dave, I saw another child has died in Texas of measles.
I know. It's terrible.
I've been in contact with my kids quite a bit over the weekend and my grandkids, and it just gives me so much joy and so much pleasure. And I cannot imagine the heartbreak and the sorrow and the pain of losing access to that little person in this lifetime. I fully believe, and if anybody connected with that family hears me, my heart goes out to you, but I do know that your baby is in the most wonderful place imaginable. And so take comfort and peace in that. It's like they got an invitation to a party that your invitation hasn't come yet. So wait your turn, but be consoled in the sense that they're in the arms of a very loving Father. And so with that, I will say that I saw that RFK Jr. was going to attend the funeral, which I believe was, well, they said Sunday. I'm not sure if it was yesterday or next Sunday. I would expect yesterday. And so I don't know if he actually made it there. And the reason I don't is because the internet has been real weird this morning. In and out, the phone blanks out. And so my attempts, day of podcast.
You have to wonder if that was welcome or not.
I know. But the thing is I do think that the family of this child and RFK Jr. and other people who seriously question the validity of vaccinations, whether they are of such a like mind that they understand going in. And you have to understand, if you don't vaccinate your child, that there is a potential that they could catch these serious diseases and that it might not go well. You see a hardy child, especially when you haven't overloaded with antibiotics, which was always our thing. We were very, very slow to insist on an antibiotic for the kids. We let their bodies try to overcome childhood diseases and sicknesses. They've got a cold, I told you before, I'm an onion soup gal, and onion soup was never the favorite of my little kids, but it always did help kind of beat back the symptoms. We'd let them sweat it out, keep them warm, and I did keep them out of school when they were sick because I figure, my kid is sick. Number one, they don't need to catch anything else on top of it. But number two, nobody else's kids need to be next to mine while they're sick. So I know for me, because at that time I was a stay-at-home mom, and that gave me options that are not available to single moms who have to show up or lose the job. And I was blessed with family members who, if something was wrong with me or I had to go somewhere, which was not all that often, let's be honest, they could step in and take care of my kids. So there is an awful lot of benefit to having that stay-at-home person. And your mom, Dave, she was so good to our whole family. If somebody needed an extra pair of hands, she and Dad were there, and he was working, but he'd give Mom a lift where she needed to go. And so we had this wonderful, wonderful safety net under us, and it was a village. Like the saying goes, it takes a village to raise children, and it does. I think looking back, in the moment how much it helps to have that security net underneath you. But I think I understand even more now that I'm older. And I understand I don't have quite the stamina that I used to. Their sacrifices.
It's funny how
And
that works.
It is funny. And I know they absolutely loved being with the kids, and the kids loved being with them. That was a wonderful thing. And Dave's mom used to say, when you came in from wherever you were, and we didn't do like regular date nights or anything like that, and we'd have a chance to kind of go somewhere or do something, or had to go do something, and she'd be taking care of the kids. And if you came back and she said, to the question, how were they? And she'd go, oh, so-and-so was, here was her phrase, trying to be patient.
Yeah, they were in a lot of trouble if we heard that.
That's it. We used to tell the kids ahead of time, if we hear that you were trying to be patient, you're in a lot of trouble, because that means that you were giving Grandma a lot of trouble and you better not do it. So she would have multiple kids at her house at all times. And I have to laugh because she just loved those kids to bits. And it was fun to see her with the kids, because she had this childlike way of looking at the world, and she saw beauty in so many things. And she's still with us. She has dementia. It's very, very difficult to see her in that state, because she was so connected and remains connected, though she can't perceive how connected she still is.
Yeah, that's the sad part of all that, yeah.
I have seen that they are making some advances in studies toward cures or delay tactics and hopefully some prevention. As all these imaging techniques are more and more advanced, I see that there's hope. DNA corrections.
Mm-hmm. That's right, yeah.
I saw that there's a scientist. Well, let me see where this came from. The source was phys.org. A scientist is rewriting DNA in the future of medicine. And what this scientist, according to what I understand, now I'm no expert on anything, so don't go by me. That's why it's good to look this up yourself.
Always.
Instead of just snipping out bad sections of DNA, he's actually rewriting code and helping the body to kind of then take over and rewrite code. Mm-hmm. And so there's...
the mechanisms are all there. Just that sometimes they go to sleep or go dumb or something. And that's the reason they say, too, that there is such a thing as aging, because there's no particular reason why, the biological life should wither and die at some point. Like the DNA is sort of coded or not coded properly or something, where everything is growing and vitality until you get to a certain age, and then everything, they just sort of abandons you in a way. But it's because those systems kind of go dumb for a while.
And do they just switch
so the science,
off?
They just sort of switch off and just sort of go to sleep or something. But the mechanisms are all there, they find. And they just need to find ways to stimulate them and turn them back on and say, hey, wake up, we need you.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. You think the cosmetics industry probably isn't in a big rush to have, whatever these mechanisms in the body are switched back on, so that the wrinkle cream sales diminish abruptly. Mm-hmm. But I have to say there are so many things that it would be such a blessing. And when I hear about all of these cuts to student scientific visas, mm-hmm. all these cuts to the organizations that are spearheading all of this research, and just because they're growing hair on mice or on, something else, doesn't mean that study has no validity, because sometimes those studies are baselines for something that's far more important than that, but it's a step. It's an understanding.
That's the
that must be
assumption,
gained.
but sometimes it is really hard to draw a straight line.
Well, it would
Some
be
of
like me. It would be like me heading over to NASA and saying, "Hey, I got some ideas for you," or "Let me have a look around here and decide what we're going to get rid of." I'm not invited to clean out. Well, you've heard me complain about the there's a big dresser down in the screen room, what we call the screen room. It's a screened-in patio. And that's where Dave keeps his stuff. And he is absolutely adamant that I need to stay out of there, even though...
I don't know. I don't really like the way you pronounce the word stuff. There was some bias in there somewhere.
Oh, there's
Stuff.
his stuff. He almost everything the man has
But
has
your-
a cord
your stuff.
hanging off of it, and they're never tamed. They somehow take on a life of their own. They defy gravity. That was, one of my first impressions of you when we got together. That everything you had a cord, and you somehow are able to stack things in such a way that one look from a person who's not clued up about all of that would think that perhaps it was a hazard. But I'll give you credit.
Yeah,
It doesn't
the modern
fall.
world. If you want all the benefits of the modern world, you do need to wire stuff up.
So you are getting a little
There's wireless,
taste
yes.
of what
There's,
our
wireless,
house.
there's
I
wireless,
love wireless.
but you still need wires to the wireless thing.
Yeah, how does that work?
Exactly,
Anyway,
yeah.
the day that wires are pronounced
fiber,
illegal,
more likely.
then I'll know that we have arrived at nirvana, because there's wires everywhere. There's wires that are connected to stuff. There's wires that are in Rubbermaid tubs. Anyway, so all of this to say, I'm not invited to go clean that out because I don't know what the hell that stuff is.
But you do anyway.
If I do, I do it anyway. So, hey, I give you deadlines, and I say, hey, get on it, because it's usually, I'll be honest, it's usually if we're having company, or I need that space cleared for some other reason, or that I just get sick of looking at it, because I like to sit out there. But I'm one of those people that if there's a huge mess, and I have a pretty high tolerance for cluttered. Yeah, I do, Dave. Anyway, that's all of this to say, I'm not invited to clean out my own husband's work area. And so why would we have people who don't know what stuff is or how things are connected? Why would we invite them to come in from the outside and take a day or two or a couple of hours or an afternoon or whatever they're doing in the name of efficiency and dump projects that are, just ongoing? And they don't understand how all of this stuff fits together. And when you cut off the money, that's like cutting off the power supply. It's like cutting off the internet. And it's a bad idea. So
It needs further study ahead of any of that, at least.
take time. You can't both have successful, long-lasting, sustainable change unless you've taken time to research it. And speed and sustainability are kind of incompatible. Yet if you go about things methodically and put in new systems and double check that what you're doing is not cutting off the main vine,
Yeah.
then you're going to come up with something that's a lot more workable, I think.
Exactly. But anyway, back on measles.
That's
You
so
haven't been able
bad.
to see how that went then.
No, I haven't, because I couldn't get on.
Yeah. Well, my comment is about that is that everybody's probably heard this on the news media at one point or another, or knew it anyway, is that measles is probably the most contagious disease there is out there. I should say bug.
There's been, since January, over 500 cases, or almost, I guess, 500 cases in Texas alone.
Exactly.
In
So-
2000, we
and that's
were
the
done
reason.
with this.
Yeah, that's right. We had pretty much beat it. And in these cases where it is clear that vaccines are effective, and this is a great example of that. And you couple that with the idea that this germ, if you call it that, a virus, is one of, if not the most contagious ones out there, then vaccines are even more necessary. And I think people should, who are skeptical, sure, nothing's perfect, and medical science certainly isn't. But when you have a clear example that something is that effective to get rid of something that's so contagious generically, then, it would have to be an exception in my mind for people who have doubts about vaccines in general. They have to say, well, there's this clear proof that this works, and that has been a tried and true thing for so many generations now, that, even if you are concerned about some other vaccines or some other, certainly you should be more concerned about the drugs that they prescribe you than the vaccines, frankly, because there's been so much study done on the vaccines, especially one that's that old, and, has been proven to be safe for the most part. There's very, very little evidence against it.
Do you think that part of the problem is that people, now young adults with children, that they just have never seen a case of the measles, and so they think it's going to be just like a bad cold or a little bit of flu? Or do you think that the threat or the worry about measles is just not familiar enough to them?
That could be an explanation for why this got started. Some people say, well, enough already. You want me to vaccinate for this whole long list of stuff, and you see it on TV all the time. They try to scare everybody. And they'll say, well, gee, why am I getting a vaccine for measles? Because it's gone, back in the early part of the 2000s.
The symptoms.
So I understand how that might have gotten started, and say, well, if we have to limit somewhere, then maybe we should limit the one that has already been handled. But again, I think people they don't do this well enough on the media to explain to people that how contagious this is. It's the same with COVID. They were very similar. That's the reason that COVID spread so quickly, because it looks like the measles virus. If you go online and you look for some images with the original COVID virus, how it looks under a microscope, and you look at a measles, they look almost identical. And for me, when I first saw that on the early rollout of the COVID vaccines, it looked immediately to me like something that would float in the air, because it looked like literally the ends of the protuberances from the virus body itself. They kind of look like the edge of a bird's wing, kind of fluffy and feathery looking.
It looks like a landmine or one of those god-awful sandburrs.
If you do go on, and again, always check us and everything else you hear on the internet, go ahead and check it for yourself. But if you go to the CDC, or you can just search that directly, I think, just say CDC measles, and there's a whole page. They have a page for most of the viruses and disorders and stuff. But I think that's where they have a little animation to show you why measles is so contagious. And
assuming
literally,
it hasn't been caught.
Yeah. Literally, it can stay in a room for like 4 or 5 hours. So literally,
floating around?
Floating around in the air. And so that's why it's so contagious, because it just kind of just floats around in the air. And if somebody had been in a certain room or certain area of a store or something within the previous 4 hours or so, it's still there. And you're thinking, oh, there's nobody here, I'm not going to catch anything, right? But that's just, it's outrageous. Go check it out. It's really quite fascinating to see. And COVID was the same way.
From what I understand, one of the reasons why people don't want to vaccinate for measles and for other illnesses is because they believe that there's a correlation between that and autism. And they say it may be 1 in 1,000 or more children might be affected in some way, which is not good. But now that we understand that measles can be potentially deadly,
that's
that
true.
Maybe a living child that maybe has to deal with autism, and they're working toward cures for that with quite a lot of success, from what I'm understanding, that a live child with a little bit of difficulty is better than a child that didn't make it.
Well, it's percentages, really.
It is percentages. It's like with anything else, because sometimes they say there can be anaphylaxis, but they can test for that. And I would suggest that might be a pathway. Before they give these vaccines, maybe you have to come in to the doctors, and maybe they do it when a child is born, but I don't know if it would register that early. Test, do a little patch test on the skin or something while they're in a medical setting anyway, and see if there's any noticeable reaction before giving these vaccines. And maybe that would help. I don't even know if that's possible, but it just comes to mind, like those little prick tests or skin tests that they've done. Because I also read, and you'd probably know more about this, I hope, that if you have had measles, if you've caught measles, and especially for children who are building up their library of immunities, I mean, a breastfed child gets some transferred from their parent. Otherwise, they're catching little colds, even though you can't really have a reliable immunity to that, but to other things. And I read that if you catch measles, that one of the side effects of having measles is that it seems to create some sort of amnesia with your immune system, so it forgets that it has built up immunity to other things. Now, I don't understand that fully. I was reading that
Yeah, they
in the last
don't
day
either.
or two.
They really don't. But there's some indications that may be true in certain cases. But you don't. I'm not sure they're ever going to be able to find that out for sure because there's so many variables.
Gee. I mean, that's a concern. That is something I never heard of before. And I know even with the COVID vaccines, they say that there are side effects to the vaccines. But I think that there are other factors, and I know even with this death, it's being attributed to measles. This latest child in Texas is being attributed to measles in the first go. But they need to test for other cofactors that made that more likely. And so I think...
Yeah, it's the terminology they used throughout COVID was, people who died from COVID were most likely to have comorbidities, as they termed it.
Meaning what?
They have other underlying health issues that made them weaker in general to resist the virus.
So children who haven't built up a lot of immunities would tend to be more susceptible to dire outcomes from measles and things like that. Also, the elderly. Why the elderly? Because it would seem like they have a whole lifetime of immunities built up.
Well, it's true, and sometimes it works that way. Like the common cold, for instance, elderly people usually don't have a problem with getting a common cold, for instance.
That's how I know I'm elderly. I don't get as many colds as I
That's
used
because
to.
you live in a temperate climate. That
and
helps.
I am outside a lot. That is the truth.
Exactly. But there are other things that your immune system kind of gets tired or something. It just
that
it's worn
switch
out.
off thing you're talking about?
Exactly. And they don't know why. So it's really unfortunate that some of the things that they keep their lifelong built-up immunity against are things that are not that bad to get, like the common cold. So there's something mixed up there somewhere. But you're right, all these new things that they're looking at, besides
so
DNA
exciting.
editing, peptide treatment, they call it, and also stem cell. And there's
Tell
great,
me about
bright,
that stem
bright
cell
future for all
Did
that.
I read a while back that it may be that stem cells will encourage teeth to grow back?
I'm actually a living proof of that.
What?
I lost a tooth, a fairly needed one, and the tooth next to it actually kept growing to mock pretty much the exact structure of the tooth that I lost. And there's no other way to explain that but stem cell.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So it's really weird. But
I think
that's the other thing
so
that they're
exciting. Don't cut any more medical research. Please don't cut any more medical research. We're so close to so many breakthroughs, and we don't know programs that might seem ancillary or seem like they're out.
And stem cells are what they call regenerative.
Try it again, honey. I'm glad it's not
regenerative which means, of course, that it actually grows new things that you have lost or have become damaged in your body. And that was absolutely unheard of.
Would that be wonderful for like burns
Oh,
and
yeah. Hmm.
deep wounds if they could regenerate that tissue? Oh,
They used to say that anything connected with your brain or your nervous system, that you can't grow new nerves. If you've lost a connection through some sort of disorder or injury or something like that, your brain tissue and nerve tissue does not grow back. There are some things in our body that do. There are some things like your skin, for instance, gets changed all the time. People know that, and the reason that people use loofahs and things. So, there are some things that regenerate
about
in
a
your
wire
body.
brush, one of those ones that you use to take paint off the side
Yeah,
of the house.
exactly.
Maybe that'll work.
But
That I can.
certain nerve cells, they pretty much said there's no hope for you because it doesn't regenerate. There's nothing we can do. But now that's not true anymore. There are some miraculous things that are already being proven in laboratory and trial basis that nerve tissue is being regenerated from stem cell treatment. Unfortunately, we're way behind that curve in the U.S. because of the controversy about that's connected to actually connected to abortions and stuff, because people have the idea that the only way that you can use stem cells is from placentas, which isn't true. I mean,
Don't they have those?
that's one
Don't
way,
they call them
but-
like lion cells or something?
Yeah, exactly.
That they have basically these have been extracted under medical conditions, and they're not just using.
A lot of people don't buy that either, though. If its origin was from so I guess I sort of get it a little bit. And people say, "Oh, this is you're playing God" or whatever. But if it's possible to do, and you figured it out, then do it. In my mind.
Well, Jesus was a healer. Jesus was a healer, and I am thinking that in the mind of God, anything that eases the pain and suffering of someone else, anything that can be intended as healing and comforting and building wholesomeness and ease as opposed to disease, then I think the Lord would be okay with that. I truly do. And I think that these medical tests that they're doing, all of these things that are furthering our understanding, that are possible now because of new tools that we have, because of new understandings. And I have to say, we're afraid of AI, but I am certain that they are extra tools that they can use to run vast amounts of data that it would have been a slow crunch before. This can happen rapidly now, provide answers to conundrums so that they can get on with things. This is not the time to be fooling around with that. And I am hoping that RFK Jr., just draws a deep breath and put up the guardrails until you've had a chance to sort through what's going on.
I do think that it sounds like he's starting to back off on some of the tried and true stuff like that that has been working for decades and decades already.
We don't need to reinvent the wheel. I mean, like I say, maybe find out what some of the cofactors are to a child who might be susceptible, or to any adult, before they take a vaccine. And I know that certainly in the COVID thing, we didn't have time. There was not time.
No,
This
that's
was
right.
pandemic. It was so contagious.
Well, that's the reason. That's the other thing that people question is, well, I'm very skeptical of the COVID vaccine because it came out so quickly.
But isn't it just inert
It's
RNA?
it's a new technology. That's why it was different than the old style of vaccines. That's for one reason. But for me, knowing the fact that they fully understood how dangerous it was from how communicable it was because of its morphology, they were in a panic. And so we have to get something out there because this thing is like the measles and it spreads like crazy. And it's not the usual thing. Usually people think, oh, well, you got to sneeze into your elbow or something, or because of the droplets thing,
6 feet difference.
And any disease, any germ, any virus like that can be transmitted that way. But in this case, it's the vast majority of infections come from airborne. And so that's why they had to come out with something very quickly and use the new technologies that were in trial, and they had a lot of support for their safety and all that stuff. But in the case of a worldwide pandemic, I think anybody would say, okay, yeah, we got to do this.
It's first responders kind of mentality.
Yeah,
do what you
exactly.
got to do to triage a very bad, potentially catastrophic situation. It was bad. We can look back on it and say, oh, gee, I hated wearing masks. And I'm in that camp. I hate wearing them.
No, nobody
but
likes
I got
it.
it.
No.
I understand why we had to. I'm wondering, in situations like the COVID pandemic, and I mean, hindsight's 2020, but I think social media and the narratives that can be shared in real time with people you don't know, so you're getting a lot more information from people, who knows how vetted it is, but also there is a deep-seated distrust of the medical capitalistic industry.
For good reason.
For good reason. I mean, we have the Luigi Mangione situation. So many people see him as a Robin Hood because they feel as if they are under attack, that they or their loved ones are being injured by the withholding of medical treatment that's
that is true in a
available
way.
because of what? Because of money, because of filthy lucre. And people they've lost patience with it. And we've said before on the Down the Donut Hole podcast that from our perspective, we feel that there has been an overestimation of the general public's ability to absorb more expense. When you are having to decide between medication that you need and paying the rent or putting food on the table or something that your children need, and I mean need, not want, because most children that I know, they get their treats occasionally, but they're not living high and, not in the fancy sneakers and all the other stuff. They might be in a knockoff pair or something to keep them happy for the time being. But I think that's part of the problem. And I think with the mask mandates, with the vaccine mandates, and all of that, I think people are afraid to be told what to do on any level by these agencies because they have been so uncaring about the needs of the public. And when you see the cost of medications here, and we all know from here in the United States, at least, that other people in other countries are getting these same medications at a far lower cost than what we're paying. And we have been hosting a lot of the research, and so it would seem like we should be a beneficiary of some of that. And so people really are disgusted, to say the least. And over the past weekend, there were tons and tons of protests. And again, from our perspective, we each must govern ourselves, no matter what your stance is on it, pro or con for this administration. You govern yourself, because we cannot let this turn into some sort of a civil war, and we cannot hurt each other because we are all Americans. We love each other. This is a difficult time because our viewpoints have become so polarized, but we have to keep our eye on the things that are important, the things that join us, because what we do not want is this to turn into some kind of a martial law situation, because we'll be stuck with problems for a hell of a lot longer if we let it get to that. Now, you can't govern the behavior of others, but you can certainly be the voice of reason wherever you are at this point. Rein it in. Whatever your opinions are, present them clearly, but don't let it get to heated exchanges or violence, because the cool heads will prevail in this. And where the medical industry, I think, with enough clear voices saying, wait a minute, it shouldn't have to come to a murder. It shouldn't have gotten there. But if they're unable to read the room,
necessary, that's for sure.
No.
You don't kill somebody really. I understand the problem, but maybe this is a bit facetious. I don't know, but I mean, like they used to say in some of the movies, well, wing them. I mean, shoot him in the leg or something, but you don't straight up kill somebody, or even just scare them. If he'd come up behind him and said, "I have a gun at your back, I could have killed you." And this is the problem that you need to fix. Yeah, exactly.
So you were in my crosshairs.
So there's no justification for a murder. There's absolutely not. But
again, it comes down to there was the Kyle Rittenhouse situation at one of the big protests, and you think to yourself, for them, this is more visceral. That's why he was declared not guilty. Because it is so deeply personal and so part of a mindset that it comes down to fight or flight. And when they discharge a weapon, they're in that mindset. And so we can take those examples and we can extrapolate. If enough people are feeling that, then we are in a bad way indeed. So govern yourself, achieve balance. Try to take things apart, talk about what's good about, even just theoretically, about what a person who doesn't agree with you, there are seeds of truth in all of that. And so try to identify what that is, find out where the variable lies, and let's try to work together with the variable and bring the temperature down in this country.
Governing yourself, it can be difficult once in a while. But anyway, what else can we do for ourselves in terms of health? I know you're a big proponent of chicken soup and all that sort of stuff.
No,
but there's
onion soup. Hey, he likes my onion soup, so
it's
great.
No.
It's no penance for him if I make onion soup.
Not that it's a replacement for vaccines or anything, but there is a lot of powerful foods out there that actually are antiviral. And there's some yogurt cultures specifically that they have shown are extremely effective against all kinds of viruses.
I know pickles and sauerkraut and kimchi, the fermented foods.
If it's fermented, yeah. It's the same cultures. A lot of it's the same culture that you're talking about with that.
Like from yogurts and that?
Yeah, culture? Like acidophilus, for instance, is one of the common ones that they put in some of the, like sauerkraut and also yogurt.
There's a company in Jacksonville, Florida that does pickles and olives and sauerkrauts and that. Oh, you think you've tasted those things, and then you taste
cheap,
the things.
Oh my gosh, it's good stuff.
Kind of, well, we are not regular customers. Our daughter buys it for us for a gift because we're so nuts about it. It's so good. But they're finding out with all of this lab research that the gut biome is so influential in our overall health, in dementia of all things. So many ancillary problems that are chronic, that they're finding that if we can address how we eat, the kinds of foods that we eat, that we can stem diseases off, just avoid them altogether or diminish the effects of them.
Well, that was my point of bringing that up. And again, let me underscore that I do think that vaccines are necessary and safe for the most part. But the idea here with talking about things that you can do for yourself in terms of diet and taking in some of these yogurt cultures, etc., is the fact that if you do that in addition to a vaccine, then that will help fight off any side effects of the vaccine itself, or indeed any drug. I mean, if you've failed any prescription, the risk of bad side effects from any given prescription pretty much are worse than the vaccine record by far.
Why do they say not to eat grapefruit or drink grapefruit juice with a lot of medications? What's the deal with grapefruit?
It has this property of antiviral, antibacterial, and all that sort of thing. So it is sort of something that will naturally sort of fend off, negative things that you may ingest.
Yeah, but why?
Because it sees it as it's not that it's a thing. I mean, grapefruit juice is not a living thing, but it came from a living thing, right? But it tends to have its chemistry is not friendly to toxins and other kinds of negative things that might give you some side effects
Are
of their own.
are some medications that they give you like a weakened form of a virus that causes your own body?
You have to wonder. You have to wonder because there's
Because-
some of the side effects you see on TV. I mean, you watch the network news on TV, and that all of the ads pretty much are about prescription drugs, and the list of things that
shocking.
can happen. I mean, somebody wants clearer skin, and you can die from taking this prescription. It's crazy, and some of them they say causes or at least and enhances the chances of you getting some sort of infection that can be horrible and end up in death. And so you have to wonder, thinking, well, wait a minute, where's this virus or this bacteria coming from? Is it in the pill? I mean, you
I
have
wonder
to
about that.
wonder.
And a lot of them say that you need to stay out of the sun. Why is that?
It's because your skin reacts. It's a vitamin D thing. In the sun you produce
light sensitivity.
Yep.
Not for your eyes, though.
No, I mean there are different factors, but one of the things I can just call up quickly is the fact that your body increases its production of vitamin D when you're in the sunshine, and that can also be sort of a neutralizing agent to some certain drugs and things. It's the same way with grapefruit juice or some of these other ones that will tend to neutralize. Same way with magnesium. Some of the things you're not supposed to take magnesium supplements if you do that normally with certain prescriptions because they tend to neutralize the chemical action of the drug.
I had to play doctor to Kelly's kittens. We've only got a couple minutes. I'll give everybody an update because there's nothing to pull you out of the doldrums better than a box of kittens. Patch, one of Kelly's kittens, we call him Patch because it's white cat with black spots all over, including patches over both eyes. Not distinct on one side, kind of blotchy on the other side. Anyway, poor old Patch had a bad eye on one of the days over the weekend, and it looked to me like he had been playing around, tussling around with some of the other kittens and got a scratch near his eye. So I put a little olive oil on it because it was kind of crusty. Put olive oil on around both eyes to make sure that it didn't get sticky. The kittens themselves were licking his eyes, trying to fix his eyes, so they might have been aware that they hurt him with their play.
They felt guilty, I guess.
Yeah, they felt guilty. Anyway, so the kittens are growing great. Patch is by far bigger than the other three. And we have kind of a fuzzy blanket in there. It was so hot, so humid. It was hotter than hell over the weekend again.
Clearly, it wasn't hotter than hell.
Anyway, I went in to check, and there were 3 kittens in the box, not 4. And I'm thinking, oh no, and it's Patch, he's gone. Then I fished around under that fuzzy, heavy, hot blanket that's on half of the box. I have half of the box with just paper, like newsprint without the ink on the floor of this big box. And on the other side, this fuzzy blanket. And there he was underneath the fuzzy blanket. And I'm thinking,
and with his fur coat on and everything.
Yeah. So poor old Patch. Anyway, so that's a quick update. The other update last week, we talked about birdies nesting in our kitchen window. They moved out. They didn't even bother. They quit. We were too much. I was too much because I told you we had that plastic taped to that back window so we could not get the cold breezes during the winter. And I kept lifting that up to take a peek in there so I could get a better idea what kind of birdies those were.
And they didn't want to be on TV, apparently.
No,
their contract negotiation was just untenable.
No, and they decided that, hey,
when we got the camera out, that was it.
Yeah, let's get the heck out of here. She's too much. So they've gone to a different condo, and the kittens are doing well. Kelly's doing well. We're doing well, and so are you. Do something fun today. Go on outside for a little while, even if it's just to sit somewhere quietly and just deep breathe. It feels fantastic. And with that, we'll say, count your blessings, for there are many.
down.